Good evening. We are well ready to begin this evening. In one moment to let everyone get situated, so if we could come in, it looks like, and then we'll go ahead and get started. It's a party now. First of all, good evening and thank you all for coming out. This is a great turnout for Friday night. This is awesome. We want to welcome you all to the 7th Cascadia Poetry Festival, organized by Cascadia Poetry Lab, Poetics and Housing Stars. And sponsored by poets and writers La Sala, for Culture, We Staff, Seattle East Ride, Humanities Washington, Subu Greater Seattle, National Endowment for the Arts, Kubota Garden, Empty Bowl Press, Office of Arts and Culture, Office of Arts and Culture Seattle, and the Washington State Arts Commission. And a huge thanks to Spring Street Center for sponsoring and hosting this event. Tonight, we welcomed Tim McNulty, Gary Copeland Lilley, Jan Zwicky, and Robert Bringhurst for a keynote reading. And before we go any further, I would like to introduce Jason Wirth. Oh, here we are. Jason is currently a professor of philosophy at Seattle University, one of the editors of Cascadia Zen, and also a member of the editorial board of the Watershed Press. Please join me in welcoming Jason Wirth.
Welcome, everyone. Really, really happy to see you all. You have no idea. Our days together are filled with amazing things and amazing people. I hope you're as excited as I am. If you're not, you will be. But it's also a launch for Cascadia Zen Volume 1. And we worked hard on this. And in a minute or two, I could maybe say this about it. Zen Master Dogen said, if you go to things, that is delusion. If you let them come to you, that is awakening. And so this is a deep practice of selfless listening. But by selfless listening in a bioregional sense, I don't mean you have no self. No, your ego self that goes to things and dominates them, I'm gonna have to get over that and do a deep listening from the ground up. Because your self is all these voices. Ones you recognize, ones you don't yet know, ones that you have a lot to learn about. They're all the peoples who have been in this bioregion, including all the non-human people. They're all there. And so this deep practice of listening, and it includes the voices of many, many people here. Many contributors are here. I'd like first to acknowledge the editors, so Paul Nelson, you've heard of him probably. Adelia McWilliam, she is not here, she has COVID actually. But it does allow me to say this. We thought about the Cascadian bioregion ecologically and not politically. And so we just ignored the US-Canadian border as a political reality. And really just tried to think, this border which suddenly you go 2-hour drive and suddenly a whole new set of poets that aren't even known in this side of the border. We decided, no, none of that. And so we worked hard with Adelia. She's up on Vancouver Island. And then T. Whitehill is our designer and co-editor. He also does an amazing job. This is a beautiful part of the world. And so we wanted a book that says thank you to the immense beauty that surrounds us by trying to be beautiful itself. So T. Whitehill was a huge part of that. So that's really a wonderful thing. Dogen said that giving includes not taking. His example is just let the flowers be, let the mountains be, let the trees be. And so this book really is, I think, born of the spirit of gratitude. And if you're grateful, you're always learning all the things you have to be grateful for because they suddenly become available. once you get out of their way. And so this is volume 1. Volume 2 is done, it's being designed, but it'll be out next year. And I'm sure we've missed things. The more grateful you are, the more you learn to listen to, the more you see. And so volume 3 is already in our mind. Volume 3 will be how we say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry I missed you the first 2 times. But we're there for you. So thank you all so, so much. And we're gonna have a wonderful time together. Thank you.
Thank you, Jason. Logistics, next, the first order of business. So there are 3 restrooms on site here. One immediately down the stairs to the right, and you'll find it just through the first door, and it's the first door on your right. And then there are 2 more outside the sanctuary, around to the right and down a set of stairs. And in the downstairs basement area, you'll find 2 more restrooms there. And also, there are maps of the Cascadia bioregion donated by David McNulty, along with boxes to transport them. So make sure you grab one for yourself and one for a friend. They're available at $40 a piece. So don't let them get away from you. Get them while they're hot. This is the quintessential map of the bioregion, so make sure you grab some. Registration for Cascadia Poets Lab 18th Poetry Postcard Fest is now open on the CPO website, as well as registration for CPO's fall online workshops, Life as Rehearsal for the Poem and Poetry as Cosmology for Overland to the Islands by Denise Levertov, forgive me for that. As well as the Cantos of Ezra Pound taught by Andrew Shelley. You can find registration information for these events on the CPO website, so don't miss out. Cascadia Poets Labs podcast, Cascadian Prophets, is also available for listening on the CPO website. Stephen Thomas, Gabriela Gutierrez Imus, John Tanner, and interviews with other poets are available on Spotify and other services. Upcoming is an interview with Lorna D. Cervantes. Committee members for this project are also needed. Okay. Cascadia Poets Labs is turning 30 this December. And we'll be hosting a party and reading February 2nd in Rainier Beach. More info will be available on the Cascadia Poets Lab website soon. And also tax-deductible contributions to the Cascadia Poetics Labs are always accepted. And welcome, and also welcome at the registration table and on the Cascadia Poetics Lab website. Cascadia Poetics Lab is also working on an exciting new project, in case you haven't heard. Kahiani, this will be a house purchase by the Cascadia Poetics Lab, located near the Olympic National Park, that will give a physical place for extended workshops, literary retreats, putting poets of color and others at the margins first, as well as for CPL events and events to the CPL mission of empowering people to practice poetry and deepen connections to place, self, and the present moment. We are incredibly excited about the development of this project, so stay tuned for updates through the CPO website and consider supporting this project through donations to the CPO, at the CPO website as well. And committee members for this project are needed, so consider volunteering your time in support of this worthwhile endeavor. So this weekend is packed with exciting and insightful talks, as Jason pointed out, panels and workshops, so please note that there is still space available for tomorrow's bioregional topography talk with Robert Bringhurst and Teresa Whitehill, which is at 1 p.m. So pre-registration is required via the website or go to the registration table also. And now, I would like to take a moment to introduce our MC for the evening. A person you may all know, Cate Gable, a Washington native who now lives in Nakata on the Long Beach Peninsula. And for the last 16 years, she has written a weekly column for the Chinook Observer in the Pacific County and has recently published works in Raven Chronicles, Bryan Literary Journal, Rain, Washington 129, Lit Fuse at 10, Rattle, and others. She also holds an MA from the University of Washington and an MFA in poetry from Pacific Lutheran University, and also a Bachelor of Arts from UPenn. Cate is also a former board member of the Cascadia Poetics Lab, and she now serves on the Watershed Press Committee. Please join me in extending a warm welcome for Cate Gable.
David, thank you very much. I want to just start briefly by saying I grew up in the Columbia Basin shrub steppe area.
Let's go.
Yeah, I know. There, also known as the Yakima Valley.
Yeah.
And the Cate is in the Chinook Nation territory, and I went to the first salmon celebration this last month, and one of the elders gave me this paddle commemoration for the support that I've given to the tribe over the years in my journalistic writing. So I wanted to just start with that. I treasure this. They kept the Lewis and Clark crew alive through the winters of 1805-06 and have not yet been recognized by our government as a tribe. Wow. We've got a great lineup today. I was saying to Paul, my head blew off as I looked at the biographies of the folks that we're about to hear. We're starting out with Gary Copeland Lilley, and I'm going to start my little thumbnail with a quote from each of the poets who are reading. So Gary says, first, I feel connected, more connected to ancestors in the kitchen. And for people who have always had privilege, equality is oppression. And I'm going to read that again because that should be a bumper sticker. For people who have always had privilege, equality is oppression. Gary's the author of 8 books of poetry. He was a submarine sailor, a member of the Black Panthers. So this guy has been around. His most recent collections are The Bushman's Medicine Show and a chapbook, Hog Killing. I think we've got that one on our bookshelf as well. He received the DC Commission of the Arts Fellowship for Poetry and is published in numerous anthologies, including The Best American Poetry, 2014, Willow Springs, The Swamp, Waxwing, Taos Journal of Poetry and Art, African American Review. His poems have been called powerful vehicles of empathy, relaying autobiographical, historical, and folkloric memories with precision and compassion. He's known for balancing craft and politics in his writing. And I'm going to end each little thumbnail with one of my little whimsical creations. This is Gary's fondest wish is to take time from writing his kitchen manifesto to drink bourbon with God. Gary, come on up here.
I want you guys to I appreciate being here, Cascadia, and the concept that doesn't recognize borders. How revolutionary. What we need for people.
Can you all hear him in the back?
How about now?
Yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Life's too bright for that.
I'm gonna read some poems that are in a collection that I am just finishing on. And it's, the section I'm reading comes from my, looking at my brother. My brother was hit by a car when he was 19, had a traumatic brain injury. And when he came out of the coma, he had been altered completely. He was schizophrenic. And he died maybe about a year and a half ago. But he had hit the road. He got on Highway 40 in North Carolina. And Highway 40 runs all the way to California. So I'm just saying, so you get some idea of how far he walked. I'm gonna read these poems. Some poems I could not help but write. Start with thou shalt not be afraid of the terror by night, coming from the Psalms 91. That was the first 3 poems or so in this collection. That night, my younger brother was hit by the car. The driver was a drunk running through the red light, right light. Drunk running through the red light. Police determined that before the strike, the drunk never even touched the brakes, never tapped the brakes. The driver was a drunken red light. In the red light, my younger brother standing dead in the crosswalk. The impact took his 6'5" frame, took him through the front, through the windshield, breaking glass, breaking bones, banging through the metal and coming out the back, landing twisted all up, twisting the night away. In the still moving road, moving with cars and people walking, and I don't even know, did anyone go to him in that glare and pitch of him out of one kind of life and into the life where the street was all he had, that and whoever else had ended up there also, not knowing why, but still there. And eventually on the streets where we would never again meet in the never of no goodbyes, just a slow, uneven unseen, knowing he was out there somewhere living and dying in the no goodbyes, wide open way he accepted day by broken day. Nor for the arrow that flyeth by day. He woke from the 2-month coma, all his broken bones, the broken bones had knitted wrong and had to be rebroken. He was 19, and the subsequent schizophrenia, when it hit, covered him like a blanket. Wait, hell no. Like sheet lightning. Everything lit up all at once. And all the options in his communication were buzzing and accelerating. Pump the brakes, there ain't no brakes. And anything gets said in such a flash of a moment, he couldn't even be there to say it, though I heard him say it and trash his words back at all of us, his family who found him a lot to bear in that condition, but who loved him standing in his naked, speaking manhood, shuddered in his shirt of inward fire and reaching past us in that crazy some way he was now wired into the entire universe the way the sun is wired to the moon, and yet spills out every which way and will never be as he was outside any going forth of him, never to be contained again. Nor for the pestilence that walketh in darkness. It was like this, a day dark with storm, when everyone sits quiet in the kitchen because God is speaking. But my dead younger brother spoke because he didn't have any quiet, no quiet. He had no quiet in his head or anywhere else, nobody quietly, nobody of quiet of the mind, not a quiet boy like he used to be. He told my sanctified mother, God didn't save him when he was dead in his coma. He insisted on death, his very own death, as only he could know it. So it must have been, he claimed, it would have had to have been the touch of the damn devil's hand brought him back. It was then he had to leave us. It was then he had to leave my mother's house. And my mother loved him. She was hers. He was of her. But she was afraid of the darkness of his demon. She was sorrowful, afraid of his demon. Afraid of the roaring she felt she could hear of his demon. And although she knew it was his demon, how could she be sure it wouldn't come out, wouldn't walk among her household, tear at the sanity of her grip on a godly world and her passage through it, not with a demon, not living with one. Her beloved son believed he had been saved by a demon and left to wander enduring the world, like one continual eviction, a seamless man asked again and again to get the hell out of anybody's doorway. His mind a river, a beautiful terror of never apologized river given passage where no mother could take him in. When my dead younger brother left, my little sister was glad. He started pissing. He pissing down the walls and in the corners, and he'd hawk up to spit on the floor of whatever room he was standing in the kitchen. At least he got up from the table. He didn't do that anywhere else. Anytime sprayed into the living room carpet as he stretched that crooked left leg and stood beside the couch, turned to the wall with his penis in one hand and the TV remote he commanded in the other. And he pissed like an animal, like something wild. He shook off the last drops, put it back in his pants. He used to bark orders at my mother and little sister. Yes, Lord, he scared them, scared heaven right out of them. With him pacing the house, they never had an easy sleep. Not one solid night, not one peaceful night, not one hopeful night of sleep. Black Harperess night scene for Jeff. You missed my American journeys, Jeff, while under pressure of your own. I can say living night and day as practically the only black man in this shipbuilding touristy town that maybe farther than any cry could join us. But let me tell you a cop story, of which you've had plenty. The hero of mine is the same cop that has stopped me 6 times already. And you of all people, you will believe me. I say it again, so you can feel the way he marked me. Yes, there are only 4 black men driving these Victorian streets, me and another guitar player and 2 others I am grateful for, but have never had the occasion to know. Remember? I went to sea while you were also at sea in your own way. Anyhow, to fill you in, I'm a veteran, a retired teacher who goes out at night to play guitar at Uptown Bar and Grill. I drive a Junebug Green 94 Cadillac to Vanderbilt because I dig all that space, the heated seats radiating down the back of my thighs. This cop, he followed me at midnight. I am saying midnight, Jeff, and I know you have a chill of this, being shadowed at that exact hour, being followed at midnight, and he scared the shit out of me because he was clocking me from a parallel street with all his lights off, and I drove straight to Safeway Supermarket, which is open 24/7 and lit up like a chicken factory any hour of that 24 without running. I hurried in that store that was almost empty. But from the deli section, I peeped the cop, scanning the aisles looking for me. I bought a roast beef sandwich, a bag of salt and pepper, salt and vinegar chips, and a ginger ale. I smiled nicely at the who cares who you are sleepy cashier and went out leisurely to my car, noticing the cop sliding into his cruiser. I chose to sit there in that diffuse parking lot light and drink my cold soda because if I got back out in the street, Jeff, we know he would have found a place, that very place to stop me and taking his given moment, the one I can't keep from arriving just when it will arrive, and he will do as I expect, as any of us black men can expect, lift up his gun and shoot me. That's how it happened, brother. That's how it happened. Every time I see him, he has always seen me first. My last one is hunger. I know you were often hungry, my dead younger brother. My dead and never gone younger brother. You were hungry plenty of times in LA. So I want to tell you about a doe in my pathway in this wild northwest of my imagination, my migration far from our southern enclave of old wizard trees that kept us some sort of alive for generations from failure to edge out our way around white fears and white limitations could be certain death. I am allergic to certain death. So were you, riding your thumb across all that highway through North Carolina, then in between Texas and California, traveling with Helen to LA. But back to this doe that had nothing to do with me in that twisted Madrona way, reaching to whatever stray beam of light in the old growth that it can get. I was leaning in the cliff face, on the edge, getting myself upward to gaze into the valley. She claimed my patches as pure beings can, a yearling lying gutted and strewn across the trail near a snarl of pink rhododendrons, a cougar kill. I'm telling you, I could see her. I'm down on the page trying to write a good poem for her, and to show you her delicate unbeauty in death, me trying to feel her as I wish I could feel you, Jeff, but not to feel her being taken down. And me unable at first, standing right over her to see anything beyond her eviscerated body, her chest cavity bloody, ravished through, that long strip of muscle at the backbone, the tenderloin gone, stomach, heart, the lungs, and the wide empty clutch of ribs eaten right down into the dirt, emptying me out as she was emptied out. I tell you, brother, she was there, she was where she fell out of any return for this. So that I can tell you, who was often cougar hungry, who simply walked that cougar down the concrete into your next oblivion, swallowed it down, fangs and claws, down where hunger lives in its hollow privacy of killing and being killed in unwitnessed silence. To you who didn't kill anything with your hunger, I offer up the sacrifice of one doe, sprawled in that what was left of her on the path, where I had to meet her and bring her away to show you I understood something of how you bore a terrible cost for our family, for this unholy country, a cost which I won't allow any repayment by words, mine or anyone's, on any unstained page.
Wow, that's a range, isn't it? Our next reader is Jan Zwicky, and the two quotes I pulled from her various writing. What is required of anyone to be and remain attentive? If we had the answer to that, we could fix everything that's wrong with the world. And poems pretty much determine their own size. They're done when I can stick a toothpick in them and it comes out clean. Must do some bacon there in Canada, I guess. Jan is a Canadian philosopher, poet, essayist, musician, and editor, interested in the relationship between philosophical and poetic thinking. She received her BA from the University of Calgary, her PhD at the University of Toronto, where she focused on the philosophy of logic and science. She's taught philosophy at Princeton, philosophy and interdisciplinary humanities at the University of Waterloo, and philosophy at the University of Western Ontario. She's a professor emerita at the University of Victoria and was a faculty member at Banff Centre. The books of her poetry include Songs for Relinquishing the Earth, Robinson's Crossing, and most recently Forge, which was shortlisted for the Griffin Prize. In Learning to Die, co-authored with Jan's husband, Robert, they weigh in on the death of the planet versus the death of the individual. And together they note that the wild has healed the world before. It's the only thing that stands any chance of healing the world now, though it's unlikely to save Homo sapiens in the process. I think Jan must be courageous enough to drink from the half-liquid earth at the edge of time. Jan, come on up.
Thank you all. Thanks enormously for the invitation to be here and for the generosity of the Cascadian Zen crew. It's really an honor to be included in this remarkable book, and a great honor to be here at the festival. Gary Snyder isn't here, but he is one of the presiding geniuses of Cascadia, its thinking, its being. I'd like to open with a poem by Gary that is in the anthology. Mid-August at Sourdough Mountain Lookout. Down the valley, a smoke haze, 3 days heat after 5 days rain. Pitch glows on the fir cones across rocks and meadows, swarms of new flies. I cannot remember things I once read, a few friends, but they're in cities, drinking cold snow water from a tin cup, looking down for miles through high, still air. I'm going to read tonight in 2 parts. I'll open with some very short poems from my most recent collection, which is actually co-authored with a photographer, Robert Moody, whose work in black and white is extraordinary. I do encourage you to take a look at the photographs in this book. And the poems here are very short, but I will read, I think, 7 of them. Earth season. The day after rain dawns clear, high summer's sudden end. Every leaf glossy and opaque, the sky preoccupied, intent. Distance, even in the corn, the celery. Who are you, human? They race away into themselves, listening only to a foreign wind. Grief sharper than frost, this abandonment of ecstasy. Moon. Moon, there you are again, solo in the pale blue sky. I agree it's strange, the way I stare. The snow on the mountains is as white, their dark rock as remote. I too said goodbye to the earth long ago. But, you see, I touch it still with my hands, my feet, my eyes. Beached seal, dying. It could be I shouldn't wait with you. When I'm dying, I might want to be alone, without distraction, work to do, unhooking and unbraiding, loosening the seams. I'll be glad if it's like this, though. under open sky, near dusk, the bow wave of the distant ferry motionless, a gull tipped sideways for a second in the wind. A poem about words. Old blues. I wish I knew why we don't get along. The visions that you've sprung in me, Jimenez, Szymborska, Pindar, Plath, I could name 100 more. Not music, no, but still, I've had to change my life. The hubbub and the laughter there behind the golden windows of your house. And yet I'm out here, cold, boots stupid in the dark and rain. Language, why don't I love you more? After flight. How beautiful the evening is here on the earth, here in the bronze shadow of the mountain, the cascade of cedar and the huckleberry bent with fruit. But you are still dreaming of the life that you saw, that was yours there on the curved bed of the sea, the flat-bottomed clouds passing above. Ars Poetica. Disappearing into silence, refusing to use words, it's no way to make a name. The heron arches its great wings, without a sound, takes flight. Rocky Shore. Sharp sun and a big northwest wind, the world a breathless rumpus underneath, gulls up, wheeling high against the light tide, running fast out in the strait. Earth with its arms wide open, uncountable its loves. Even you, even me. One more of these ontological studies, a couple of new poems. Hummingbird. Over your left shoulder, the feeder you're not looking at, bent down into the hard truths at your desk. A thrum, low, warm, your father, whistling at his workbench, or sun sudden through the torn and racing clouds, or sometimes, those times you do remember to look up, that other truth, suspended in midair. So, where I live now is right there. I've come from growing up here, so I'm still learning the region in important ways. And one very important trip I took was to an island called Mittelnatch out in the strait south of the island I live on. Because the tide was wrong, the runabout had dropped us off a mile west of the beach. Barnacles, a scramble up to raw basalt, blackberry thickets, thrift and camas clinging in the sharp-edged pockets on whose joints we tried to balance, and I slipped. The churning white reached up for me, a kind of slapping roar. But in the second that I hung there, also silence. Like the silence after music, an intelligence, a love so vast it was not able to distinguish, could not tell me dead from me alive. I was bone, I was plankton, I was the loose spill of gulls that lifted like a sheet across the beach, unraveling in the high haze late that afternoon. A knot meant to be let slip, untied, retied. Perhaps I did die there. I thought my boot had caught, or did I leap? There would have been no difference. Fathoms vaulting now below me, octave on octave of joy. And I'll move now to a sequence of somewhat longer poems from The Long Walk. But I'll introduce them with one more new poem. Late spring. Too cold for weeks, and now too hot. The temperature anomalies so great, they're measured in multiple standard deviations from the mean. Hummingbirds arriving with the light and clustered at the feeder because the salmon berries aren't in bloom. Bees, too, tumbling in the isolated crocuses, 3 or 4 at once, moss, dusty, crunching underfoot. And yet, those bees, exquisite in their dozy, awkward concentration, each hair as though new washed, and the polish on their black legs. The hummingbird aloft, its sci-fi swoop and hover, red flame at its throat. Or my friend, that last phone call out of the blue, the startling energy in his voice, the gathering vision, what we knew, he knew, the beauty of that knowledge. Goodbye. Goodbye. Above the falls. I took the path along the river, July, dry as late August, wanton heat. The grief was on me hard. I sat above the falls and drowned in noise. The shallows slipped and raced and turned to molten glass, then loosed themselves in heavy, light-smashed froth. Here, there, from bare rock, single harebells, 6, 8 inches high. Their blue flashed, hot against the gray slope of basalt, the dense transparence of the water. And one bent double, bobbing several seconds just above the surface, skimming it, inside a bee. I'd been watching leaves, the alders dropping early in the drought, drift, heading for the race, the sudden smoothness as they picked up speed, and then from nowhere, in the back eddy, almost touching the hand I'd casually dipped, another bee, still living, one wing under, struggling to right itself. I reached, but the current, complex, swept it, looping further out. I reached again, even then its body more submerged, and lost my balance, staggered, braced myself against an offshore rock, the bee a long way out now, caught in the main sluice of the current, being carried frictionless across the edge. Upstream, slow water, dreaming, lost, late afternoon. The stunned boom of the falls, breachless, steady. This is a short poem called Letter to Simplicius. As Jason will know, Simplicius is famous among philosophers for his help in preserving what we have of Parmenides. an even older pre-Socratic philosopher. We're talking 2,500 years ago now. And Simplicius wrote out Parmenides' poem about being, and he made a note saying that he was doing so because copies were getting scarce. And in fact, we've got about 40 lines from the proem and some fragments of the rest, yeah. Anyway, letter to Simplicius. Immeasurable thanks. It got here. Your guess was right. It took a beating, but the gist's intact. You'll understand me when I say our situation is uncertain. We'll do our best to send it on. Expect us soon.
Okay.
In winter. Finally, the death's door cases had been cleared. The heart attack, the stroke, the overdose, the guy who had a pillowcase stuffed up his nose and blood still pouring down his face. It was just the old guy in the wheelchair and his son and me. CNN on the flat screen in the corner. They were glad to see the back of Harper, but they weren't keen on another Democratic president. The old guy said he did hydraulics for the logging industry, one piece in particular. I couldn't catch it. Yarders? Installed them now on trucks. Can't have 14, 15 guys cooling their heels off Toba Inlet while they fly into Campbell to be fixed. The doctor came into the waiting room, sat down beside me, jolly, young. The good news is you don't need surgery, but see, he held an iPad up, just there. You broke the fibula. I could splint it, but you'll need to ice 6 times a day this week. You'd have to wrap it up each time. You'd be better in an air cast. Oh, he looked up at the clock. Except the place you'd get one's closed. I thought about another ferry trip, the bad storms ripping up the strait day after day, the cancelled sailings, and the way my foot kept swelling. I'm from Quadra, I began. I'll take phone Joe's, the old guy said. He'll have 'em. Joe's? The doctor said. Joe's, up on Meercroft. Unsure, the doctor stood and started punching at his iPad. Just a minute, I'll be back. He was. You're right, he's got them, and he's open until 5:30. Okay, I said, and stood. How are you getting there, the old guy asked. A cab, I said, meaning to reassure him that I wasn't dumb enough to waste time waiting for a bus. He flicked a glance toward his son, who'd flicked a glance at him the same split second. I'll take you. Oh, no, I said, and gestured to the old guy. You should stay here. A cab will come in no time. The kid was on his feet. His girlfriend's coming. He'll be fine. I'll just go get the truck. Where'd you leave it? Asked the old guy. Up, above. Yeah, the old guy said. Maybe a minute or two. It was a big Dodge Ram. Old. Spotless. Pitch dark, and the rain had started up again, headlights gleaming on the pavement, refracting in the rivulets that streaked the edges of the windshield. Where are you going afterwards? He asked as we pulled in. I told him to the ferry and insisted that I get a cab. I'll take you. I don't know how long I'll be. No worries, I can wait. When I came out, he was texting, heavy metal screaming softly from the radio. He switched it off as I got in. He told me, as we drove, that he was almost finished a degree in engineering, 1 term left. Thought he'd go back in the spring if he could get his father squared around. He'd driven truck for 4 years out of high school, helped in the shop. Quadra, he said, as he turned into the ferry parking lot. He remembered times he'd driven there for Timber West, how residents had lined the roads, yelled at him, raised their fists. He didn't look at me. Is someone waiting for you on the other side? I'm going to phone. He grunted non-committally. You sure you'll be okay? I'm sure. I pushed the big door out against the wind, wrestled my oversized stiff leg down to the pavement, turned. Bless you. I said, the door thudding against my shoulder in the gusts. Then I stepped back, let the wind have it, and it swung too.
Yeah, time for one more.
That's all it'll be. This is called Haydn, the Unpublished Sonatas. Haydn wrote a number of keyboard sonatas in his middle period that he didn't publish, and we don't know really anything more about them, but they are some of the most extraordinary and far-reaching music that we have in the Western classical tradition, certainly rivaling the depth of late Beethoven. What are our hopes for the world? A winter night after snow, the long walk home, faint smudge of moon back of the clouds, and the great weight of the firs, the open fields whose whiteness floats above them like a ghost. No wind, no lamp or candle in some distant window. You could be the only animal. How long? It will be hours. Only your footsteps and what you carry underneath your coat, what you have folded in your arms, what is cradled on your heart. It is so close, maybe it's become your heart. Perhaps it always was. Only your footsteps and the dark, its nearness, and the way it does not care, that clear, sweet silence after snow. Is it the dark itself you love? No, but forgive yourself for asking. And climbing the stairs at last, then, and lighting the fire, and slowly, gently, taking off your coat. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jen. Tim McNulty, the first stanza of one of his wonderful poems. Offshore, as the night waves crest, in the flood tides, faint bands of light roll and echo into the darkness like wails. Gary Snyder says of Tim, he's become one of the strongest poetic voices for a huge realm that is new to history, the North Pacific west edge of the continent. Tim's a poet, essayist, naturalist based in Washington's Olympic Peninsula. He's the author of 10 poetry books and 12 books of natural history, and has received the Washington State Book Award and the National Outdoor Book Award, among other honors. His newest book, Salmon, Cedar, Rock, and Rain, Washington's Olympic Peninsula, is published by Braided River and is just out, I think. His natural history books include Olympic National Park, A Natural History, and Washington's Mount Rainier National Park. His work has been translated into German, Chinese, and Japanese. Gary was instrumental in the colossal effort of removing the Elwha dams, a triumph of salmon. A triumph of salmon restoration and tribal sovereignty over politics. He's going to talk a little bit more about that tomorrow too, I think. So, my little whimsy here. Tim can be found drinking delicate little beakfuls of spring water with the white bark pines and the Olympic marmot. Tim, one up.
Maybe I'll have a few delicate little beakfuls to share with you all tonight. Just a tremendous privilege and joy to be celebrating the launch of Cascadian Zen. It's a luminous anthology, one that really acknowledges, I think, the spiritual presence of this land through human voices. I've been looking forward to this for many, many months, years, and it's wonderful that it's finally out in the world. A half century ago, I had the good luck to land on the Olympic Peninsula. I adhered to the first rule of bioregionalism: don't move. Since then, I've steeped myself in place in the community, welcomed the land and its creatures, its beings into my writing, and place continues to be kind of a focal point, I think, of my writing, prose and poetry. So I want to begin with a poem from the anthology. It's an older one when I was kind of looking to try to find the language to fit an extraordinary landscape, and working on that. It's called Above Hull Valley, and it comes from a ridge just west of Cat Peak at the beginning of the Bailey Range in the Olympics. It's in 4 parts, but I'll skip the numbers. One time, Michael Daly told me, when you use the numbers, it's kind of like molding to hide the poor joinery in your car. I don't agree with that, but above Hull Valley. In the late slant of mountain light, a silver ribbon follows after itself. River music lifts through spruce and hemlock a mile below. A low sea of cloud hems the foothills, while a finger of mist sifts past the first swells of mountain, drifts upstream. Along a furrow in a sandstone wall, the slightest star-shaped flower steals something from the southern sky. Snow trickles into a still pool. A sheet of glass widens against the stars. Another poem from the high country of the Olympics, and this one is The Wind in Lost Basin. From this time of year, it's late September, squeezing in one of those last days of the high mountains for the summer. The Wind in Lost Basin. All night long, the wind honed the slate and sandstone boulders, a late September wind just beginning to cut its teeth. It whittled at the talus ridge, moaned softly in the spindled trees, rattled the slender seed stalks to their knees. All the flapping tent-fly night, like wind in the sails of a small lost boat, ruffle in the marmot's thickening coat, sheen of ice in the shallows that one day soon won't melt away, the balance tipped to dark from day. No moon, Arcturus low, and the hunter slowly picking his way up the glacier. Another one from the Olympics. I worked outside. I worked in the woods and the mountains for quite a long time, and this poem comes from the Queets Valley, one of the great mandala of rivers radiating out from the Central Olympics. I was working on trails. It's called the Queets. We worked through dinner on a windfall spruce above Pelton Creek, a tree thick as we were tall, wedging our cuts, edging peavy and shim, wheel after slow turning wheel to near dark. Smoothed out the trail tread, packed our tools and started back 7 miles downriver to camp. Past Bob Creek, the last light was loosening itself from the grass, falling from the moss shoulders of maple and alder. A doe and her yearling browsed the far riverbank, and somewhere nearby a flicker tapped randomly. The river carried with it its own light and coursed slowly through the late summer bottom. The tools lay in a pile where I'd dropped them at the trail side. My partner hadn't yet caught up. All I knew at the worn and frazzled end of that long day was the last light slipping from us, the chill air troughing down dark timbered slopes, and the lucent voice of the river telling me it no longer mattered. And I think one more from, this is from the whole river, again, late in the season. I had returned with a pack stream to pack out a bunch of rigging and junk from a bridge job I worked on over the summer. And kind of fell asleep, woke up in the middle of the night for a moment, didn't know where I was, and just an incredible, beautiful, almost an epiphany that just stayed with me and tried to capture in some images. Moon horses and ground fog. A corner of dream opened into night. Soft ring of the bell mare close to the open shelter where I slept. A low fog had moved up from the river, and the dark shapes of horses grazed knee-deep in the silvery light. In the hazy reach between sleep and waking, I was among them, tasting the fog that was our ground. It was cool and smelled of leaf mulch, of dampened ash, and the slow breath of a glacier. The moon stood still in a spruce tree, and the sound of the river moved away over polished stones. I was midpoint on a journey I had forgotten I'd begun, and the dust of winter stars covered the empty shoes beside me. So we had this summer another fire season, another increasing fire season, one of the largest fires in many, many, many years burning the Olympics. And for us admirers of poetry of the bioregion, a huge fire, over 6,000 acres at Sourdough Mountain, closed the North Cascades Highway. We got to listen to Gary's poem from Sourdough Mountain Lookout, Jan. And so these are some poems in 2003. There were several fires that broke out around Sourdough Mountain, and the Park Service on short notice needed somebody to be a fire lookout. And friends at the park called me out, kind of a childhood dream of mine. And I jumped on it. A couple of days later, I was up there for several weeks. So a couple of poems from that to, I guess, honor the mountain that just went under flames again. The first one, Night, Sourdough Mountain Lookout, and Phil Whalen's Sourdough Mountain poem, it's also in the anthology. He says, talking about the windows all around being at the top of this peak, with one sun roaring through the house all day, and the others crashing through the glass at night. Mm-hmm. And you really are just up in this incredible realm of stars. I couldn't sleep very well for many nights. A late summer sun threads the needles of McMillan spires and disappears in a reef of coral cloud. Winds roil the mountain trees, batter the shuttle props. I light a candle with the coming dark. Its reflection in the window glass flickers over mountains and shadowed valleys, 17 miles north to Canada, not another light. The lookout is a dim star anchored to a rib of the planet, like a skiff to a shoal in a wheeling sea of stars. Night sky at full flood, wildly awake. And this is a poem called The Council of Pines. It's also comes from the North Cascades, and the white bark pine succumbing to climate-related blister rust, mountain pine beetle. It's a tree that's in trouble. It's been long endangered in Canada, was just declared threatened in the US last year. The Council of Pines. When I'm weighted down with the futility of trying to change anything, I seek the high ridges and good counsel of white bark pines. Gnarled and wind-blasted, they spread wide, long-limbed crowns and stiff tufts of needles expansively among the slender spires of mountain hemlock and subalpine fir. They welcome the full pitch of wind, needle blast of ice, slow broil of summer sun. They embrace their mountain world full on. At the highest reaches, even they are brought to their knees, and storm-hobbled crawl shrub-like along ridge crests, limbs unfurled in tattered banners against the cobalt sky. Every now and then, I need to see that. Along a ridge on the Cascades crest, I find the charred hulk of a lightning-struck pine, its trunk shattered on talus, its broken-off base silver-brown, sun-baked amber, flecked with delicate furrows of wolf lichen. But inside the charred hollow is the deep green of boxwood leaves, and beside them, a single sprig of white bark, scrabbling up through a rubble of ash and duff. And I think I'll finish up with this poem. It's a kind of a prayer for the Columbia and Snake Rivers. It's called Ascendance. It's based on a historic photograph by Ellis Morrigue of a Chinook salmon leaping up Lower Kettle Falls. Kettle Falls, of course, inundated beneath Lake Roosevelt behind the Grand Coulee Dam around 1940. It was a tremendous fishing place for indigenous people. When a wild Chinook thrashes the air above Kettle Falls, the coiled spring of its body ripples with the surge of 700 river miles toward home. The river pours its thunder between striate sea-bottom rocks, a glassy tongue imploding into whiteness. To the salmon, it is a beckoning arm. There is no human gesture so fervent this long journey inland, no effort so seamlessly one with its element. The river's story, descending through epochs of ice and stone, coalesces in the salmon's momentary flight. The salmon's heart is the river's heart made flesh. The salmon's flight a pulse. Ours is the wisdom to see them both as one, power to power joined. One falling, one born by a wisdom all its own in ascendance. So, thank you.
I live at the mouth of the Columbia now, and there were salmon called hogs that were 200 pounds and more that used to come up the river and go all the way up into Canada. Of course, the dams made short shrift of that. But I've seen photos of those. Some of our fishermen in the southwest corner of Washington remember them. Robert Bringhurst is our last poet tonight. A couple of quotes from him. He says, "I'm not my favorite subject. The earth is a lot bigger and more interesting than I am. I also have a strong desire not to be trapped in my time." And this one, "What shall I do with the night and the day, with this life and this death? Robert was born in Los Angeles, California, raised in Utah, Montana, Wyoming, Alberta, and British Columbia. Now a Canadian poet, topographer, translator, cultural historian, and linguist. He studied architecture, linguistics, and physics at MIT, comparative literature and philosophy at the University of Idaho. He holds a BA from Indiana University and an MFA in creative writing from the University of British Columbia, and was awarded an honorary doctorate from the University of Fraser Valley. He's translated works from Haida, Navajo, Classical Greek, and Arabic. He wrote The Elements of Typographic Style, which we do have a couple copies of here. It's a reference book on typefaces, glyphs, and has been translated into 10 languages. His 3-volume Masterworks of the Classical Haida Myth Tellers is one of his texts. He's the author of 14 collections of poems, as well as pamphlets and broadsides. His first collection, In the Beauty of Weapons, was Selected Poems, 1972 through 1982. And it was enthusiastically reviewed by Margaret Atwood and chosen as the Times Literary Book of the Year in 2004. He's held fellowships from the Canada Council for the Arts, the Social Sciences, and Humanities Research Council of Canada. Kate Kellaway described his poetry as rare but never rarefied. He has the curiosity of a scientist. He never indulges in emotion. His writing is at once lyrical and Spartan, and yet he is witty. And while he has no taste for lamentation, many a poem catches calmly at the heart. My wish for Robert is to be cleansed and blessed by Haida Spindrift on Balance Rock Beach. Come on up, Robert.
Well, thank you all for being here. Paul Nelson's been doing an awful lot of fine things for poetry in Cascadia for many years, and probably there at least one person besides Paul and myself who was at the 3rd Cascadia Poetry Festival in Nanaimo in 2015, is that right? Something like that. If you were there, you heard the first part of a poem called The Ridge, which I was working on at the time. 8 years later, I finally got to the end of it, and it was published earlier this year. It takes about an hour and a half to read, so I hope you remember where the restrooms are located. I'm going to read you a small piece of the poem, or actually 3 or 4 small pieces. There are a lot of pieces. You have something to say about drinking, about everybody except me. Don't I get a drink too?
In the fridge.
How about single malt scotch with God? So the ridge is the spine of Quarter Islands, which is sort of right in the center of Cascadia. 3 miles down, beneath the spruce and fir and Douglas fir and hemlock and red cedar, forgotten species of archaea and bacteria are living out their long and on the whole quite peaceful lives, sipping billion-year-old water and nibbling on bedrock. They're eaten in turn in their sleep by underground fungi and nematodes. Deep down where they are dozing, it's a steady 60 Celsius, 140 Fahrenheit, year-round. There are no days or nights or seasons. Reproduction is primarily by subdivision, once in 100 years or so for some, for others once in several thousand. This is all nonfiction. These way down relatives of ours have never seen or even heard about the sun, the moon, the night sky. They may nonetheless be sleepily aware beneath their granite basalt quilt of something moving up above. The microscopic rise and fall of the pulverized tides in the atomized subterranean sea may be what makes their dark and close lives bright and hopeful. Some will breathe oxygen when they can get it. Others adhere to an older tradition and breathe only sulfur. Their ancestors fled underground, dodging the rising level of oxygen in the air 2 billion years before there were humans. Since the first hydraulic fracking operation in Kansas, 1947, nitroglycerin fracking and dynamite fracking and hydrochloric acid fracking had all been tried. Before that, nuclear fracking came 20 years later. We have fracked to death who knows how many trillions of tiny subterranean creatures. That extinction is, of course, still underway. Yet those who live beneath the ground are mostly safer than the rest. Safer from us, that is, and our lust to have everything now. Every nugget of wealth and jewel of energy instantly and entirely for themselves, for ourselves. 4 billion species at the blistered, wind-swept surface will presently be gone. Down in the rock, 2 million more will take no notice when our single species dictatorship sputters, as every dictatorship does, and then teeters and falls. Geobacillus jurassicus and its many friends and neighbors who have buried themselves alive and gone on living have traded up to a larger future than ours. Not to eternity, no, but to the nearest thing there is, the shrinking balance of the life on Earth. 1 billion years or thereabouts, which is to say 5,000 times the current age of Homo sapien. After that, the hyperventilating sun will start to barbecue and eat the inner planets, while the outer ones cut loose and wander off. And one by one, the farther stars explode or just run down and lose their way. Not even heaven lasts forever. Space folds up and time leaks out, and life itself, no matter how well hidden, dies. Here, now, this will then be nothing, nowhere, never, neither present, past, nor future. Time and space will cease to stick together as they do when there are places. Nothing whatsoever will be all a vanished planet and its creatures also vanished, can remember. In its place, in all its places, will be no place. Only somersaulting subatomic particles, the tiniest of prayer flags, tearing free and the obliterated building blocks of time and space, of body, speech, and mind, and heart, and matter, flying everywhere but somewhere. Out of earshot in the blizzard of cracked atoms, twisted slivers of a song that no one ever meant to sing. It has no words, no intonations, no inflections, just the shrill atonal squeaking of the disappearing spheres. Which is to say, what has been can indeed become what hasn't been, and does become and will become what never was or will be, when all the
maps and calendars and compasses and names and dates and distances and references disintegrate, and where it was is nowhere. Tree frog singing, nighthawk diving, ruffed grouse drumming, 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 rufous hummingbird, returning 2,700 miles to a place in space no larger than itself. Red squirrel curled in her squirrel clef and watching, toadies squeaking, juncos clucking, ravens calling and not calling, silent jeweled blue and red and yellow dragonflies out hunting. The mind of the ridge is as large as the ridge. And the mind of the world is as large and as varied and full as the world. A lesson worth endlessly relearning. Nevertheless, what the telescopes say and the landers and rovers and lab experiments say is that sentience flowers out of insentience on an infinitesimal scale. Between the freezing point of helium and the point at which protons and neutrons and mesons explode is 2 trillion degrees. That's the whole temperature spectrum as far as we know. Life has been found in about 7 millionths of 1% of that range. And the island of life, a pinprick in fact, not an island, is out at the edge, nowhere close to the center of things. Our 7 millionths of 1%, that slight imperfection where mind has its toe in the door, sits at 15 ten-thousandths of 1% above absolute zero. In sober prose and slightly rounder numbers, 99.99999% of the range of observed thermal energy and its side effects, climate and weather and darkness and light, for example, is out of our league. Too much for us, too much for any form of life we've ever seen. Just 1/10,000,000th of that 99.99999% is too cold. The rest is too hot. The bit that isn't way too cold or way too hot is less than 1/10,000,000th of the whole. Inside that scratch on the thermometer are Everest and the Amazon, the Mariana Trench, Death Valley, Ellesmere Island, all of history and fiction, and the ridge. Heat, like water, earth, and air, is a thing we have to have. It's also like wealth, a thing we mustn't have too much of. Beauty is larger than blindness. It is. But blindness is many times larger than mind. All grass and moss and wood and fern is flesh. All rock is bone, all water blood, and now a man, not quite alone, is heading downhill through the forest on an overgrown and often washed out trail. On his back, a tattered rucksack. It is empty. In his left hand is a bag, not big, but full to overflowing. It slaps against his left leg as he dances, slips, and stumbles down the trail. In the bag, still mostly frozen, are the skins and bones and fins and souls of halibut and salmon. Where the trail stops are cobbles, pebbles, crumpled slake and bladder kelp, big drift logs, and some fraying lengths of braided polypropylene, eroding chunks of styrofoam, a snarled nine-armed fist of monofilament, and many squashed and sea-scrubbed plastic jugs and lids and bottles. Gifts of the World Wide Web of oblivious civilization. Just beyond them is salt water. Wading in a little way, the hiker empties out the contents of his bag. It is a gesture and a ritual. Returning to the sea, what is the seas, then bringing back to land some fraction of what's not. The man and his mind, his hands and his feet are all parts of the process, no less and no more. He carries and empties and rinses the bag. Herring gulls, hermit crabs, sea lice, and sea snails take it from there. From where he stands between the trash line and the sea, you cannot see or smell the salmon farms just north of here in Opisolo Channel, Frederick Arm, Nodales, and Quadero channels, west, northwest past Yellow Island, or northeast in Raza Passage, nor the cluster east, southeast in Jarvis Inlet, Seashell Inlet, Salmon Inlet. In the farms, as in the cut blocks up behind them, men are working, sometimes hard. It is a business, after all, and must go on. Except that poisoning the sea, the earth, the air, and the slow fire that is everything we are is not a business.